All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the program on radio.com on this Friday, May 22nd, as we begin a Memorial Day weekend unlike any we've known, and we'll see exactly what it brings. We're all looking to see exactly how much things open up and how well we do with everything over this Memorial Day weekend, a time when you remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice and lost their lives in any way for their country. This weekend also, they're going to fly the flags at half mast for those that have died in the pandemic, which is now 96,000 and counting. So they will be remembered this weekend also as the number heads towards 100,000, which it probably will by the end of the weekend. We'll turn our attention to sports, obviously, here for a couple of minutes. There's a lot going on. Later on, I'll take you back through some of the things of the Piazza trade, which happened on this day. I went back and read a couple of things of people recounting it, and some's true, some's not. That we know very, very well, and some of the things that were reported aren't accurate, but hey, that's okay. It's a long time ago, and I can tell you exactly how this unfolded because the program that I was a big part of, the Mike and Amanda program. Our program was a very big part of the whole thing. So I'll tell you sometime before this evening's out. I'll tell you exactly my remembrances of exactly how things went down. The passing of Jerry Sloan at the age of 78, and you do the show long enough, and you've spent a lifetime in front of the microphone, which I have. You see a lot of people that you knew and a lot of people that you watched coach and play pass by, and then you say, oh, remember this team, remember this player, remember this coach. And Jerry Sloan was it should be noted what he brought to the NBA, because this is a guy who had a really good career as a player, tough player, really rugged, tough defensive player for a Chicago Bulls team that really would beat the heck out of you when it was Van Leer and Sloan, backed by Bob Weiss, and before that Clem Jim Haskins, and then you had Bob Love and Chet Walker at the forwards, and Bullwinkle and later Dennis Autry at the center, and really tough, rugged team led by Sloan, who was a 4 or 5 time all defensive, first team all team defense, tough, gave no quarter, just wasn't a great player, but a rugged defensive, tough player at the position. Coached the Bulls, then went and became an assistant for the Jazz, and then coached the Jazz for an incredible amount of time, 23 straight years. 15 straight years in the playoffs, 16 straight years with winning seasons. I mean, he became a fixture. I mean, the square-jawed, rugged. His teams played well. Obviously, the whole Jazz teams with Stockton and Malone being fixtures for all those years with Sloan. I knew a lot about Sloan because a good friend of mine, Rick Majerus, used to scout for them in the playoffs all the time. He was very close with Sloan. And because he coached, obviously, Utah, and when his season was ending, Rick was only cared about basketball. When the season was ending, he left the campus. He was never on the campus again until the season started again. He had no interest in being there. So he would leave and travel all over the place, and he would basically scout the playoffs for the Jazz, and he'd go and prepare game plans and everything, and Sloan loved him, and he did a lot of work with them through the years, so I got to know Sloan a little bit from that standpoint. But really, guy who had almost a 40-year NBA career, and a good one as a player, an even better one as a coach. I mean, really a wonderful NBA career that should be remembered. And gone at the age of 78. If I remember right, he was suffering from Parkinson's, which you don't know when that's going to strike. And again, gone at the age of 78. A lot of people recently, and you see them go at 70 and 78 and 74 and 76. When you're in your mid-60s, it seems young. It really does. All right, before we get to a new guest today from the MLB Network, John Morosi, we'll get to him. I don't know him. I've never interviewed him before, so this is new today. But we'll get some thoughts on the baseball and everybody coming back today and what everybody's doing. Every day I chronicle the day for Mickey and Bernie. Today, for Bernie, it's again 2006, May 22nd. And ironically, today they both got 4 hits. Today, Bernie went 4 for 4 with a walk, 3 runs scored, 2 RBIs. To raise his batting average to 335. And then for Mickey today, this was 1954. You don't see a lot of 54. We haven't used a lot of 54 yet. You know why? Because Mickey wasn't hitting. This day, Mickey went 4 for 5 and raised his batting average to 252, which is absurd. For him, absurdly low. This was very much at this point an off year. He was hitting. He had 5 homers and 14 RBIs and batting 252, which for him, 340 on base percentage. Also, usually has a 340 batting average and a 500 on base percentage. These are absurdly low numbers for Mantle. So this was not a good start for him. But he did get 4 hits as the Yankees beat the Red Sox 7-0. So 54, they go on and win 100 games, but don't win the division. Don't win the pennant, not the division, the American pennant that time. The only year before 59 that Mickey won't play in the World Series. He played in the World Series every year from 51 to 59, except for 54, when the Great Indian team beat them. They won 103 games, and I believe the Indians won 111, if I remember right. They won 103. So from that standpoint, it was a very, very good year. A very good... I apologize because someone just contacted me that said that we weren't on radio.com until just now. I apologize for that. I've had a lot of technical problems with radio.com lately, folks. I apologize. I don't know what happened. I can't tell from here, from home. They just text me that Joe and Evan were on. They apologize, but now we're on. So I don't know what part you got of the open or not, so I apologize for that. If you didn't hear it, I talked about Jerry Sloan. I talked about Memorial Day. I talked about later that I'll talk about the Piazza trade because it happened today. And I read a couple of things about remembering the trade, and they're not exactly accurate. I mean, I'm not going to cite anybody for not being accurate, but, listen, people get the story and they hear it and they repeat it and they say, let me go back to what happened. One of the stories had him locked into the Marlins. He was not staying with the Marlins. He was on his way to the Cubs. I mean, that's what his agent told me flat out on the phone. If he doesn't come to the Mets, he's going to the Cubs, as an example, just as one example. And I'll explain how the whole thing happened over those days. But I'll do that a little later on because I have to get to our guest in a minute. And again, if you didn't hear it, I mentioned the passing of Jerry Sloan, which should be noted because Jerry Sloan, there were so many rugged, tough teams in the early 70s. There really were. But the Knicks had some great battles with the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls had really good defensive guards. Their scorers were their forwards. Chet the Jet, Butterbean, Bob Love. Those were their scorers. Their forwards were, they'd score, but they were, they'd score 14, 12s. They were those kind of scorers, but they were rugged, tough, nasty players. Norm Van Leer, who you've heard of, and Jerry Sloan. Bob Weiss was the third guard. They had Clement Haskins for a while, too, on that team. They had a couple of centers that were interchangeable. Tom Bullwinkle, if you remember him, but they had the 2 big scoring forwards, and Walker, Chet the Jet Walker, who came over from the Sixers. They played on the championship team with Wilt, and Bob Love, who really came out of nowhere to become a big star, the Butterbean, Bob Love. So those were their big scoring forwards, and they ran their offense through their forwards, which was unusual in that day and age. It didn't happen a lot to have your forwards be the premier scorers on. A lot of times it was your center and your guards. These were your forwards, were your premier scorers on this team. So, but Sloan had a great career, both as a coach and as a a player, all defensive. I think he was first team all defense 4 times. Rugged, tough player. Gave no quarter, square jawed, and just a tough guy. And the Bulls would flat beat you up. That's what they would do. They would just flat beat you up. So on this Memorial Day weekend, which is unlike any other, and on Memorial Day weekend, we remember those that gave the ultimate sacrifice for their country. That's what Memorial Day stands for. We're also going to now fly the flags at half-mast to remember those that have passed for the virus, which is now at 96,000 and counting this Memorial Day weekend, as it hits towards 100,000. Something that never should have happened in this country. But again, it's too late for that now. Too late to worry about what shouldn't have happened. It has happened. So, the other story now as we hit this weekend is how we're handling the slow but steady expansion or reentering of our economy. And as we go to different places, as they open up golf courses and beaches and other things slowly, how we handle that. Does the virus come back in waves? And also, as we try to find a way to bring sports back. And that's what's happening now. You know, you're seeing it with the NBA, you're seeing it with the NHL, you're seeing it with Major League Baseball as they slowly start to try and bring sports back. So with that in mind, we'll get to baseball with John Morosi from the MLB Network, a guest that I haven't talked to before, so a new guest for the program and for me. So we will talk to him when we return. John, welcome. How are you?
Doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Welcome to the program. I've never interviewed you before, so I looked up some things about you. I see that you studied some kind of science at Harvard. What was the environmental science it said? Is that what you studied?
I did, yes.
Can you tell us something about the pandemic? Do you have any pandemic experience?
Well, Mike, my pandemic experience has to do with my wife, who's a physician. So she's been taking care of COVID-19 patients for the last 6 weeks or so. So she's actually still at the hospital today.
Has she been in intensive care?
She's been doing great. And I would say, Mike, that the advice that she's given me at the outset about just keeping our distance and washing our hands and wearing masks, all those basics, still hold true today, and I've been listening to her as I have my whole life.
Has she been working in intensive care like a lot of doctors?
So she works one level below where the ICU would be. So she's an internal medicine doctor here in Michigan. So basically the next level below where the ICU is.
All right. Everybody we've talked to the last couple of weeks, everyone we have on, different writers and different people about whatever sport they cover, all are telling us how they see it and what they see as their issues. So from a baseball standpoint, as everyone starts to inch back, what are you most concerned about from a baseball standpoint?
It's a great question, Mike, just because there are still a lot of issues outstanding. I think, as Joel Sherman has written about in the New York Post as well, the key thing is now getting the agreement on the healthcare dynamics and making sure that all the requisite municipalities and the states all sign off on the plan. I think that, to me, is navigating that dynamic of trying to have all 30 teams playing potentially across the country. Who knows about Canada and with Toronto, if that's able to happen. Certainly some obstacles there. But I just think, Mike, it's the differences between the states and making sure that all the playing is compliant with the local rules wherever the games are being played. I think financially, Mike, I'm very confident that a deal will happen by June 1.
The idea of what would shut the game, the logically tough one is, for all these sports, what will shut the game down again? What will it take? Is it 5 players? Is it a more than one team? I mean, all the commissioners have said the same thing. One player can't shut the sport down. We all know that. But what can shut the sport down? I think, and I don't know if they'll even put that in writing, what will shut the sport down. But that, to me, is the main question. What would it take for them to say, we can't do this?
You're right, Mike, that probably we're not going to have a very firm rule as to what that is. I think what the commissioners across the board would say, and I think it's the correct way to look at it, is you have to consider the context in the city and the state in which the team and the player happen to be at that particular moment. We certainly can be hopeful that maybe the summer will bring some level of relief. We don't know that yet, but it does seem to me that it's not necessarily how many players on your team are infected, but maybe what the rate of transmission is broadly in that particular municipality and the state at the time, nationally. So I think it really depends if there's an outbreak in a city and then you have an outbreak on your team. That's different than 2 or 3 players getting it in a circumstance where the overall rate of transmission, broadly speaking, is quite low.
You know, talking with John Morosi, MLB Network, does a lot of different things for them. John, baseball is going to try it a little differently. Now, they're coming back to start their season, basketball and hockey trying to finish theirs. So it's a little different setting. But the thing about baseball, which is going to be tricky, is you're going to deal with all the different cities, and they all have a different set of problems. Like, look at our problems in New York. Look at Michigan, and what no state has had more trouble and more problems than Michigan has had, as an example. So the climate is different in every one of these cities. That makes that very tricky for baseball.
It does, Mike. And I think the other part that's unique, as you point out, is that we're just trying to start a season in baseball, and it's not necessarily an unlimited amount of runway that we have to finish the season, which I think is why, after different ideas have been broached over the last couple of months, it does seem that 82-game season is the magic number, because I really believe that it's logical and sensible to not push things too far into the fall, because we know a lot of experts have said we could be due for a second spike in cases at that time. So I think you're right. It's the number of moving parts, the travel as well. I think that a really key part of the agreement, or at least the proposal, is keeping the travel in those thirds of the country, if you will, those different channels, west, central, east. I think that having as many traveling situations that don't involve long cross-country flights, that certainly works to baseball's advantage.
And you guys, whether it's MLB, the MLB Network, NFL Network, you guys have a different relationship with the sports. What do you see? Maybe you've been told already from your guys' standpoint. What do you see your role being? What do you see the media's role being? And how are they going to be treated? Do you know yet, or you don't know yet?
We don't know yet, Mike, and I think that for all of us, first and foremost, I think we're all citizens first and family members first. I know that's how I think of myself right now. It's how I've always tried to think about myself in that respect, but being married to a physician has really, I think, driven that point home for me right now about how I can best contribute, broadly speaking. But I think that for us, it's about telling the stories that are going to connect the American people to our sports. And I watched over the weekend. I thought my colleagues at Fox, and I still work at Fox Sports, the NASCAR production was great. I loved the post-race interview that was done with respectful distance. The Southern reporter, Regan Smith, was a number of feet away, and then there was a boom mic that held the stick microphone to get the sound from the driver. I think that, to me, it was very inventive. The race callers were back at the studio in Charlotte, and it looked brilliant at the end. Certainly, you're missing the fans in the arena, in the stadium, but in general, it's about having that celebration of watching the sport again, and it's our job, Mike, I believe, to tell the stories as completely and empathetically and thoroughly as we can, no matter if we're at home or at the venue itself.
Have you ever been a team play-by-play guy?
I have not. No, I've been a sideline reporter, so that's been my function for the large part in my TV career, and also in the studio analyst at times as well. But I think it's going to be a very unique thing to call if the play-by-play and the analyst are calling off tube, as they call it.
I think they're going to probably have to. I think.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very unique arrangement, but that's where maybe the sideline reporter, in some respects, Mike, becomes more important than ever, because then they're the eyes and ears of the broadcast. They're on the ground. We have to all wait and see, but I think we all have to be ready for anything. Right now.
I would think they would at least have a room where they would bring maybe the managers and one player from each team each night, and you'd have a couple of maybe pool reporters or a couple of people there who get to ask a couple of questions. Maybe that's what I haven't seen any plan for the media, and most of the broadcasters I've asked, none of them seem to know yet what their role is. So, I would think something like that's feasible anyway.
Right, or we may see some post-game press conferences done over Zoom or different technologies that we've all been getting used to using. It really is uncharted territory, Mike, and I think it's just all up to us. And when we think about what we're doing here, I think it's connecting the people that love these sports. We all want routine, and I do think, Mike, baseball has a very special role to play because it's the one sport you play every day.
No, listen. Not only that, it has a special relationship with our culture. There's no whether you still think baseball is the most important sport, which we know it's not anymore, or the one that does the best in the ratings. Doesn't matter. Baseball has a special role because of its daily schedule, but also because of how it's viewed. It is different, and I think it has a different responsibility. I really think it does. That's why I think it's important that the owners and the players see that and don't turn this into an ugly fight, which you don't seem to think that will happen.
I don't, because I think that both sides realize how important it is to play. And also that, to your point, Mike, that if baseball comes back this year, and I believe it will, that the economics and the money to be made is in the future. If you do it right now, if you're really careful with health and you're careful and thoughtful when it comes to the economics of things, fans are going to remember. American sports fans are very smart. They pay attention. And they're going to remember in 2025 who did it right in 2020. And I really think that the money to be made economically, that's for the future. But now it's that cultural connection that we all need right now. And I think if baseball does it right, it's going to really be remembered well in this country for many, many years to come.
Do you think there's teams that are in worse shape than others? Is there a team that stands out to you that you think is going to have more problems than other teams are going to have?
I don't think so, because I really believe that the revenue structure for a lot of teams, certainly the scale is different on the large revenue teams versus the smaller mid-market. But I think that the structure of the teams is quite similar in terms of how they get their local revenues and the national revenues as well. So I think it's going to be a fair start to begin the year. The one thing that's going to be unique, Mike, is how ready is the pitching? And that, I think, is going to really, I think, play into the hands and the advantage of the teams that have very strong, deep pitching staffs that are adaptable, that have a really good 30-man roster, more so than a 26-man roster. What
is a legitimate season for you? What has to happen for it to be a legitimate season?
I think 82 games is a fine number, Mike. I really do. I think that is probably around that magic number where you feel like it's enough. You've played within your division. You've played the corresponding teams in your the opposite league within that same divisional structure. So I think that to me is very fair. And then the expanded playoffs, which that to me is really the unique part of all this. That the expanded playoffs were something that baseball was thinking about even before COVID-19, and now it becomes that much more of a reality to add another layer of excitement and intrigue to the playoffs, which I think is going to be great for the game in years to come, too.
We're talking with John Morosi, who's MLB Network. They're talking about 50 players. We know there's going to be a heavy load of pitchers carried. What do you think the nightly roster is going to be?
Great question, Mike. I think around 30 players, somewhere in that range. Maybe they would have it down to 26 just for the continuity of gameplay. But I really believe that when you don't know just how much the pitchers have been able to throw, because your point earlier on in the conversation, the number of different ordinances and state laws right now and regulations, you can't expect everyone to show up on June 10th or June 15th in game shape, ready to go, because they've all had to deal with different circumstances in terms of what they can actually do with their workouts. So I think as a result of that, Mike, for player safety purposes, I think a 30-player active roster to begin the year makes a lot of sense. Maybe you can reduce it as time goes on, but I really think having the additional health allocations there, knowing that there certainly is still a risk that a player could get ill during the course of the season, I think having the extra players right there with the team makes a lot of sense.
And what do you think teams do with their hotshot player who they wanted to put in the minor leagues for a couple of months? Forget the idea of his future in free agency. Forget about what they're trying to do in service time. Put that aside. Put about not having that guy not play this year because he doesn't have anywhere to play. Do you escalate that guy into a major league role when you didn't want him this year?
It's a really good point. I think that, Mike, if you've got a AA player or a AAA player who's a major prospect who is ready, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to be with the club, especially because the logistics now of calling up someone else from the minor leagues, how long it might take to get that player to the big leagues. Also, remember this, Mike. This is a sprint now. We always talk about baseball as being a marathon. This is a sprint season, and there are going to be 7 potential playoff berths in each league. The competition for them is going to be fierce, and you might see a team that didn't expect to be that great this year.
I think you will.
All of a sudden calls up the best guys and goes for it.
I have. I've had a couple of people mention teams. I've had people mention the White Sox. I've had people mention Arizona, the Texas Rangers. Yep. I mean, so I definitely think there will be a couple of teams that get off really fast and then can probably hang on for dear life. I think that probably will happen. I definitely, and I can tell you, it's not a bad thing. If you have one of those teams that isn't the most gifted, if you can get them honed and get them sharp and get them out of the gate fast, you can pick up maybe 5 or 10 games on the field over the first 25 games or so.
Exactly right, Mike. It's going to be a season truly unlike any that you and I have ever seen in our lives. And I think that among all the anxious things that we all have about just day-to-day life, the exhilaration of a sprint baseball season has a chance to be really special for, I think, everybody in the country.
I didn't think I'd ever see the World Series canceled. I don't know if you were working then. I was. We were doing Mike and the Mad Dog in those days. And we saw it canceled, and I never thought they'd cancel the World Series, and they did. And it was the bleakest time we ever worked in the years the dog and I worked together. That was the only low point in terms of fan interest or anything else, was that time when they canceled the World Series. It really turned the public off to sports in a big way. I don't think it will be treated the same way if they didn't play this year, because it's not their fault. But you can tell it's something none of these sports want to fool around with.
You're right. And I think that for baseball to be able to have a World Series, it's that celebration. It's a sense of closing out the year the right way. And I really think, Mike, that's why baseball is not trying to schedule 120 games or 100 games. They're choosing a manageable number. 82 is manageable, because the worst case would be to play the regular season and have to cancel the playoffs because of a second spike, because we were trying to get it all the way into November. If you play the playoffs roughly on schedule in October, I think you've got a better chance for that postseason to be played, especially if you have to go to one site. Because when you think about it, Mike, logistically, if you're playing your games at a neutral site, if you have to do that during the playoffs, it's much easier to find one site that is safe to play where the transmission rate is low than 8.
Has there been anything discussed yet that MLB Network will do differently this year?
I don't know, Mike. That's a great question. I think we're all waiting on just the direction, first and foremost, to have the season be played, and I think we'll make the programming decisions, or my bosses will, from there. And then I will take whatever directions are given and do our best with it. But I think that the last couple months have been good preparation of just kind of preparing ourselves mentally to be as flexible as possible. And then when the word go is given, I'll be happy to do my part.
Thanks very much for coming on. Appreciate it. Good luck.
Mike, my pleasure. Have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
John Morosi, MLB Network, as all the sports on this Memorial Day weekend. And for those of you that were on the stream earlier, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I know you didn't get the beginning of the show. I apologize. They tell me they have got that fixed now, so I do apologize for that. What I did allude to was I talked a little bit about Memorial Day, and then I talked a little bit about the passing of Jerry Sloan, who, I used to love those Knick Bull games. We talk about all the Knick rivalries in those years where the Knicks had great teams. And the Knicks had a lot of rivals in those days. Okay, I mean, they did. They had rivalries with a lot of different teams. But they had really an underrated rivalry with the Bulls, because the Bulls were a ferocious defensive team. They really were. They were a team that would just knock the stuffing out of you. They were just tough. And they ran everything offensively through their forwards, because they had Chet the Jet Walker and Bob Love, the Butterbean. Those were their 2 big scorers. They had 2 defensive guards in Norm Van Leer. You've heard of Norm Van Leer, Storm and Norman Van Leer, and, of course, Jerry Sloan. And Jerry Sloan was a rugged, 6'5", tough guy. As an all-defensive player, gave no quarter, really knock you on your rear end. And then he became, as you know, a legendary coach. And the amazing thing is, Sloan had almost a 40-year career. As a player, he had an 11-year career cut short by injury. And then he had a long career, 26 years as a head coach in the NBA, 23 years with the Jazz, winning 15 straight playoffs, 16 straight winning seasons. He never won a championship as a player. He never won a championship as a coach. But he had a great impact on the NBA. He was there all that time. He had a great run. He really did. And he was the kind of figure you don't want the NBA to forget about, because he was that important to the league. And here's another thing that people may not realize. He took the Evansville job and then decided it wasn't for him. And then the Evansville team had that tragic crash after that, which just shows you how life is sometimes. Really wild when you think about it. But he coached the Jazz forever, passed away today at the age of 78. Not old, but a guy who had been suffering with Parkinson's for a couple of years and had, I guess, serious dementia the last couple of years. But again, very, very important NBA figure. Rugged, tough, underrated, and a heck of a coach who was there for a fixture. Here's an example. There were 245 coaching changes while Jerry Sloan coached the Jazz. 245 coaching changes around them. That's unbelievable. Think about that kind of stability. 245. Yeah. I mean, I could tell you from a standpoint of how many different shows I saw come through our radio station while I was in the same place for 33 years. So I could think of all the different people I saw come and go through my 33 years. Imagine 245 different coaches. I mean, remarkable. But Jerry Sloan gone at the age of 78. Now, I did mention that at the top of the show. On this Friday of Memorial Day weekend, as we start Memorial Day weekend, it's usually a time when we stop and take a look at the first measuring point of any baseball season is Memorial Day weekend. You stop and say, okay, here are the standings. Here's my team. How's my team doing? How does the race look? Here's the surprise. Here's the disappointment. Here we are. Well, obviously, the disappointment is that we haven't started yet, and we're a ways away. And hopefully they can get what they need to get done to get that done. They're working on it, obviously, as we speak. All the leagues are in a very big way. You know, one thing, I mentioned this yesterday. The more I gave it a lot of thought, and I have to admit, when it was first broached, I didn't give it a lot of thought. But I did the last couple of days, and I thought about the alternative to the onside kick that the Eagles have recommended. And you know what? I really think it works. First of all, their heart isn't in the kickoff anymore. They don't want the kickoff. The only reason they have the kickoff now is because they need to have some way of having a mechanism of having an onside kick. You can't have an onside kick if you don't have a kickoff. They eventually don't want the kickoff. They want to take the kickoff out of the game. They think it's a useless play. They also think it's a play that ends with a lot of injuries. They also have to keep certain people around for to run the play, and they'd rather not. So it's something they'd like to do away with, the kickoff. Eventually they will. Not the punt, the kickoff. Okay? Now, what they have come up with, which I really think works, is instead of a kickoff, an onside kick, you line up onside the ball. The way they have set up the rules now, you really can't recover the onside kick. It's running at about 10%. So what they've come up with is you just score. You're about to turn the ball over to the other team. Instead, you put the ball on your 25-yard line and you run one play. You have to gain 15 yards to keep the ball. You have to get the ball out to the 40-yard line by whatever means, penalty or yards gained, and get the ball out to the 45-yard line and get a first down, and then it's your ball. Otherwise, it is the other teams' ball on anywhere from the 25 all the way out to whatever short of the mark is. So if it's the 35, the 36, the 37, whatever it may be, the 28, whatever, or if they sacked you and it's the 15, whatever it is. The bottom line is it's their ball there, just like, but you had a chance to keep the ball, and they want you to be able to, down a couple of scores, be able to find a mechanism for you to get the ball back, which is what the onside kick has ever done. But the problem is, the new rules they put in for safety do not allow you to gain the onside kick. It's become almost impossible. And the number is down to 10%. So they would instead rather put something in which they would hope would have more turnover, which would have more success rate. Now, a play like that, if you ask me on a fourth down, 4th and 14, 4th and 12, what do you think the play is? I'm going to say it's about a 15% play. Well, it's still better than a 10% play right now. So let's see what it would run. And I say, you know what? Give it a season or two. Don't take the kickoff out yet. You can do that in the future if this works. Don't take the kickoff out yet in case you have to put it back in because you don't like this. But I would think you'll like this more than the onside kick. And I'd like to see them go to this play. I would like to see them go to this alternative to the onside kick this year. So if you don't understand, again, you score a touchdown. You decide you want an onside kick. Now, late in the game, you're only going to onside. You're not going to do this early in the game. There'll be no surprise onside kicks because you're not going to just line up and say, I'm going to run a 15-yard play here. I doubt you'll see anybody do that. They could, but I don't think you'll do that. By rule, you would be able to do it. Because if you don't complete the play, the ball's on the 25-yard line. You're giving up that risk. But here's the deal. You get the ball on the 25, you got to get 15 yards by whatever means, penalty, gain the play, whatever it takes. You have to get the ball to the 40-yard line to keep possession and have a first down. Otherwise, it goes over to the other team in your territory. I like it. I think it deserves a look. I'd like to see them put it in for 2 years and see how it works. I think it will be more exciting than the onside kick has become. The onside kick has become almost a wish and a hope. So I would like to see them do it. Hopefully they will. Back after this.
He'll get you the sports any way that he can. It's Mike Francesa on the Fan. Sports Radio 66 and 101.9 FM. WFAN.
All right, we come to you on this Memorial Day Friday, the 22nd day of the month of May, as we begin what will be an unusual, to say the least, Memorial Day weekend. Casamigos Tequila, as always, brings you the program, brought to you by those who drink it. And we begin this weekend, and hopefully it's a safe one, and you find something interesting to do. I know the weather's not great tonight. It's not supposed to be great tomorrow. I even moved my golf up today because tomorrow looked bad. But Sunday and Monday look pretty good, so hopefully we salvage a couple of days out of this very strange Memorial Day weekend. It's also, Howie will be with you at 6:30, bringing you Game 3 of the 2015 series. So Howie will bring you the pregame with the Mets as they continue to do that. Give you the games from the Yankees and the Mets to remember as we go through this for at least another while. Baseball won't be back probably till the 4th of July or later. Now, as you know, today, May 22nd, it's not only the start of the Memorial Day weekend, and we salute those as Memorial Day weekend is for, to salute those who made the ultimate sacrifice, and we do that. But it's also a day that the Mike and the Mad Dog program has always been linked to, and that is the whole Mike Piazza trade, okay? Did Mike and the Mad Dog influence the trade, and how did that unfold? And I can tell you, it happened 22 years ago today, and I can tell you exactly what our role was, what our role wasn't, and how it played out. And this is exactly how it happened. Piazza goes from the Dodgers to the Mets, to the Marlins, okay? I'm driving by Shea Stadium on a Tuesday night. The Mets are playing a makeup doubleheader after a rainout with the Reds. As I go over the Whitestone Expressway, I'm going home, not going to the game, but I can see into the stadium as always, and the place is empty. So next day when I get to work, I'm saying, you know what? the Mets is like a ghost town. There's nobody there. They should make a move for Piazza. I said, so Dog and I start talking about it, and the fans start to get into it. Well, it goes on that day and into Thursday. Thursday, I get a call from Piazza's agent who says Piazza wants to play for the Mets, and you know what? By tomorrow, he's going to be a Cub. So I'm like, well, why don't you call the Mets up? He says, well, we are, but we just want to tell you guys, too, because we know you've been drumming up Piazza, so we're just telling you, bang the drum because he wants to play for the Mets. But I'm telling you right now, he's not going to be here another day. He's going to go to the Cubs because they're not keeping him here. He'll be a Cub by Friday night, okay? So it's Thursday, and we keep banging it as Dog and I often did. We stir things up, and we're stirring it up with the fans and everything. We get Steve Phillips on, and Steve Phillips says, 100%, absolutely no way, not happening. Fred Wilpon makes a statement, not happening, absolutely not happening. Steve comes on and just blows it out of the water completely. And we're like, Steve, why not? Makes sense. No, it doesn't. We're not doing it. Here's why we're not doing it. We got this, we got that, we got Hunley, we got this, we got that. We're not doing it. Too expensive. We're not making the move. We're like, listen, there's not. So we kept it up, okay? We kept it up. We just kept pounding it and pounding it. Little do we know that after Wilpon says no, and Steve Phillips had come on and basically thrown cold water. He had basically said in no uncertain terms, there's not a chance in hell that this is happening. Little did we know, and I had a very good relationship with Mr. Wilpon, but I also had a very good relationship with Nelson Doubleday. But I never spoke to Mr. Doubleday that week. I did speak to Piazza's agent. He called a couple of times that week. We tried to get Piazza on. He didn't want to come on, but he kept calling us, Piazza's agent. Piazza never came on. And I never spoke to Doubleday, but we kept pounding on Thursday and pounding that they should get it. And we got the fans going crazy, and they're calling the switchboard. And I gather they have a meeting, and at the meeting, Doubleday gets at the meeting and says, the boys, I was listening to the boys on the radio, and they're right. We should get Piazza. We should look into it. Now, I can't take you through the wheres and wherefore of the trade because I was not part of that. But we did, according to, and Mr. Doubleday did tell me this, Nelson Doubleday told me this later on that year, that you guys actually did help convince me that this was a good idea. I actually was swayed by what you guys said. And then someone else in the organization told me the same thing, said I was at the meeting, and it's absolutely true. You definitely did. And Mr. Doubleday told me this in the elevator when I going up in the elevator. He says, you really had a big impact on that. You guys actually did influence me on this. I really thought it was a good idea. You made plenty of sense. We needed a drawing card. And amazingly, that year, they drew 14,000 before Mike, and then drew 31,000 a game. Think about the difference. Not only did they finish close, they didn't make the playoffs, they fell a game short, and Mike got off to a slow start, then went gangbusters. Hit 340, had 20-something homers, had a million late game homers. You know how good Piazza was. But the attendance was unbelievable. It went from 14,000 a game to in the middle of May to 31,000 a game the rest of the season. So it was a home run on every level. He becomes one of the great Mets. And, what made me do it was more from a standpoint of here's a dormant franchise which is drawing flies to here's this guy that I just think could be an incredible drawing card. I was looking at it more from that standpoint than anything else. I can tell you, never spoke to Piazza. Never spoke. I did speak to Piazza's agent a couple of times. He called a couple of times on Thursday, even called again on Friday morning. And he said, Mike is in the shower, and he's an hour away from going to the Cubs. I remember that phone call. It was like about 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock on Friday or whatever time it was. But that was his comment. When we asked him to come on, he wouldn't come on. But he said, right now he thinks he's going to the Cubs. And that's all we heard with Thursday and Friday was he's going to the Cubs. And never spoke to Mr. Doubleday. I would never have called Mr. Doubleday. I didn't have that kind of relationship with him. But I did, he always was nice to me at the ballpark. He'd always stop and chat and everything. I went upstairs in the elevator with him a couple of days later, and he told me, he says, you guys had a big influence on this from that standpoint. You did convince me. It made plenty of sense. I thought it was a good idea. And I guess, Doubleday, when he put his foot down, he was the senior partner. When he put his foot down, he got what he wanted. He didn't do it often. He did it here. And the rest, as they say, is history. So, did Mike and the Mad Dog have did we make the trade? No. Did we maybe influence Mr. Doubleday into making a trade? Yeah, maybe. We went crazy on it. And why did we go crazy on it? For this reason. It was causing a stir. The fans were getting revved up like crazy. It was getting a ton of publicity. It took on a life of its own. And you know how those stories are on the radio. They start taking off on a life of their own. Everyone now is thinking about Piazza. Everyone's waiting to see where Piazza is going. I saw today one story said that Piazza was going to spend his whole career in Florida. No, they had told Piazza, don't even bother renting. Stay in a hotel. You're not going to be here. I think it was Dombrowski, if I remember right, told him, you're not staying. You're leaving. They were looking for a place for him immediately. They were getting rid of him from the get-go. He was not staying. And I remember on Friday before the show started, maybe an hour before, I remember being in the back room, and they called me and said, you have a call in the control room, and it was Piazza's agent. And he said, Mike's going to the Cubs. And that was on maybe like 11 or 12 o'clock on that Friday, if I remember right. I don't think it was on Thursday. I think it was on Friday. Nowadays, it was before the trade came down. I think the trade came down. I think the earliest we heard about it was on Friday in the afternoon. But again, now I don't remember that, exactly what time we heard about it. But before I heard about the trade, he said to me on the phone, Mike thinks he's going to the Cubs as of right now, not to the Mets. And that's the last I heard was that, and I think I even reported that, saying that right now it looks like the Cubs are in the lead. We did not know that the Mets had entered into negotiations. And then next thing you know, boom, he's a Met. And I didn't know the extent of the Doubleday thing until after the fact. I did not know it as it happened that he had come in and said, hey, you know what? At the table, I was listening to the boys on the radio, and I agree with them. And that was one time where it actually made a big difference. I also think you fans made a big difference because I think you swamped them with calls asking for Piazza. I think you swamped the switchboard asking for Piazza. I think that had a big impact too. And I think you add it all up, and Piazza came, and the rest is history. I mean, it was a great, great pickup. I mean, here was a guy who not only was a tremendous star, but he could fill ballparks. That's the rare guy, the guy who people will buy tickets to see. And Piazza was a slugger that people would buy tickets to see. He hit dramatic home runs, as you know. And he had a knack, whether it was the Yankee-Met series or obviously the Braves-Corsair game after 9/11, Mike had a knack for hitting a big home run. Think about how many times he hit big home runs late in games or to win games or against the Braves or Mike had a knack for the big home run. Killing Clemens in the Yankee-Met games. I mean, he hit some of the longest home runs against the Yankees I ever saw. I mean, I remember one game against Clemens, he had a 3-run homer and a triple, and he was wearing them out. The Mets won that game like 8-0 on a Sunday night. That was the day where they fired all the coaches before the game. And I went to the game at Yankee Stadium, and the Mets won like 8-0 and pounded the Yankees. And Piazza went crazy in that game. But, I mean, so many times you saw him have big – he owned – just like Jeter owned the Mets. Jeter and Bernie Williams used to wear the Mets out, especially Jeter. But Piazza owned the Yankees, especially Clemens. He pounded the heck out of them. And, I mean, how exciting was he as a player? He was a great, dramatic – home run hitting star. That's what he was. And that's why it worked out so well. But that is exactly how that week unfolded. I remember going by the building on the Tuesday night and reacting to the place being a ghost town at about 7 o'clock at night. And it started there on Wednesday. It went on Thursday. Steve Phillips came on and poured cold water on it. Fred poured cold water on it, and then the next thing you know, voila. No Cubs, Mets. And the rest, as they say, is history. That was 22 years ago today to replace the onside kick. I saw that Andy Reid said that he would be old school and would rather they stick with the special teams, keep the integrity of the special teams. And the one problem with that, for Andy, is this. It's not the same as it used to be. The way they've put in the safety concerns and changed how you can line up on the onside kick has made it almost impossible to recover the onside kick. That's why the number is down to where it is now. It's down to 10%. So they've basically neutered the onside kick because of the safety concerns. So what I would say is if you want to keep the foot in football and you want to stay with the onside kick, then return the ability to line up in the way you could in the past so that you could actually attack it. They've tried to make it as safe as possible. They've obviously tried to use safety concerns, which I understand. I understand the idea of wanting to use safety concerns everywhere. But you've limited the ability to cover an onside kick, to be able to recover it. It's very difficult right now. It is very easy to cover, which is why you're only getting 10% conversion. That's too low. So either return to the old ways on the onside kick or give this a shot and see what happens for a year. And he's saying, hey, I got a guy who can complete 4th and 15. Obviously, we all remember to play the Tyreek Hill in the Super Bowl. Okay, he did have to get away from a fierce pass rush, but he was very good at that. He had to get away from a fierce pass rush all day, Mahomes. But again, 4th and 15 is not easy. It's not supposed to be. You're getting a possession out of it. Now, is there risk? Of course there's risk. That's the idea of it. There's a risk-reward. I'm trying to get the ball back versus the idea of giving them the ball where they already have a field goal. Now, a lot of times, remember, in those games, they're just going to line up, run the ball into the line 3 times and kick a field goal and extend their lead. That's all they're going to do. They're not going to put the ball in the air because they're winning, and it's late in the game. So what they're going to do is try and run the clock out. If they can't do that, they're just going to take the ball, run it to the line 3 times, use up the clock as much as they can, kick the field goal, and then, start over again. So normally you're not going to give up touchdowns there anyway. I mean, if you started doing it earlier in the game, then they might score on you. But either way, again, the idea is to put something into play that's viable. That's really the idea. Howie coming up at 6:30. He will give you the the table for the Mets playoff game from 2015. Let me get a call in here. Ken in Matawan. Go ahead, Ken.
Mike, what's going on? How are you, man?
Good. What's happening?
Hey, I want to know, a healthy Ken Griffey Jr. or Mike Trout? Who's a better all-around baseball player?
That's a very, very close. I would say
Ken Griffey Jr.
Right, I'm going to say that based on, I would say it's. Thanks for the call. I would say that it is about as close as it can possibly be. But I think Trout has been a smidge more consistent. I think Griffey was actually flashier with the glove. Both very prolific with the bat. I think that Griffey hit the more exciting home runs. But Trout's such a great player. I think I would give it to I would call it 10-9.5. I think I'd give it to Trout 10-9.5. But I think it's that close. And just on consistency. I'd say this, and I haven't seen as much of Trout as I saw of Ken Griffey Jr. I never saw Mickey Mantle or Willie Mays in their prime. I thought Ken Griffey Jr. was the most talented player I ever, at the top of his game, I thought he was the most talented player I ever saw on the field. I thought there were a couple of guys that were on that level. Just a couple, but I'd say that he was probably it. Trout is one of them, though. Trout, and I think Trout has been a little more consistent, just a smidge, just a smidge more consistent. But that is a very close race between those two. They're both brilliant, brilliant talents. Mike in Port St. Lucie, what's up, Mike?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking the call.
Yes.
Real quick, Flacco with the Jets doesn't make sense.
Why
I
not?
figured they just, I don't know.
$1.5 million for a backup. Who can play? What's wrong with that?
I guess my question to you is, why has Kaepernick got a job yet? After this, this
Because he's
COVID-19
not worth the
stuff.
trouble. Because
Well,
he
we're in
is a
pandemic, so-
but he's not worth. First of all, Kaepernick's not a better player than Flacco. And number one,
You don't think so?
no, and you're not looking for someone who's a role player. You want someone at this stage who's a role player. You're not looking for a starter. You're looking for someone who at this stage is willing to be the role player. Why would you want to bring someone like Kaepernick, who's going to be up on the soapbox every day in New York? Why would you want to do that to your team and create that kind of headache for your
Not
team?
the Jets, just in the NFL.
Well, listen, that's a
Jets are
different
doing the
story.
same
You
thing
asked
with
me
Cowboys.
about why didn't he get the job with the Jets? That's what you asked me. You didn't ask me why he didn't get a job. I'm going to give you the answer, and thanks for calling. The reason why he doesn't get a job is because he's not worth. His talent is not worth the trouble of all the commotion he's going to cause. He's going to cause division in your locker room. He's going to be a media headache for you on every time you turn around. He's going to cause a commotion in your locker room all the time that has nothing to do with your team. And he isn't good enough to be your best player. So if he's not going to be your starting quarterback, why do you want to bring all those problems to your team? It's not worth it. I wouldn't do it in a million years. He is going to want attention. He's going to get attention whether he wants it or not. Just the fact that you bring him up tells you he's going to get attention. So why do you want the backup quarterback to get more attention than anybody else on your team? It's not a good situation if you're trying to build a winning team. That's why it doesn't work. That's why it makes no sense. It makes no sense for all the reasons I just gave you, because the idea is to build a winning football team, not to have a commotion and a sideshow. Let me squeeze one more in real quick. John Hazlitt, go ahead, John.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Good, what's up?
So I was a paramedic on 9/11, and it's busy weeks after. Back then, didn't have DVR. Was working the night of the Met return game, which I would have loved to have watched. Did not get to see it. Obviously, knew what happened. A couple years after, they did the HBO documentary, 9 Innings to Ground Zero, and watched that. And when they played that Piazza home run on that return game, it brought me to tears. And this was years after. That's the type of guy that Piazza was, bringing those kind of memorable moments.
That home run, for a home run that didn't mean a great deal in terms of the standings or the season or anything else, it was the biggest. It was the biggest home run that I've ever seen. I was in. We did the show and thanks for the call. We did the show from the stadium that day. Fred Wilpon called and asked Dog and I to do the show from the stadium that day. Of course, he wanted everyone to feel calm, and he thought that if they knew we were there from early in the day on, that people would relax. It was a good idea. We did the show from there. I was still there, obviously, all those innings later. And when he hit that home run, I would say half the building was crying. It was one of the most emotional home runs or moments I've ever seen in a sporting event. And for a game that it mattered a lot because it brought sports back and it brought everybody back that night. So it had great meaning, but from a standpoint of baseball, it didn't have a lot of meaning. But from a standpoint of society, it had enormous meaning. It was one of the biggest moments and one of the most emotional moments I've ever seen at a sporting event in my entire life. Probably the most emotional moment I've ever seen at a sporting event in my entire life. That's how big it was. And it was typical Mike. That was what Mike was. Mike was about the big home run. Mike was about the big moment. That's who Mike was. Mike was dramatic. He was a dramatic slugger. He was a guy who hit big home runs in big spots. He was a star. In every way, he was a star. Box office, everybody liked him. Okay? Mothers liked him. Daughters liked him. He was handsome. Everybody liked him. And he hit the ball out of sight. Harry's got the Mets and a game from 2015. Casamigos Tequila sponsors the program, as always, brought to you by those who drink it. Have a very safe and hopefully enjoyable Memorial Day weekend. We'll be on Sunday, 9 to 1. We will not be on Monday. We'll be on Tuesday at 6 on The Fan. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Be safe. We'll see you then.